I stood in my own living room wearing last season's dress while my husband's mistress wore the diamond bracelet I'd been eyeing for months. When he called me worthless in front of both women, I smiled, because what he didn't know was that I'd just become richer than him. 5 years ago, I met Raymond Cole at a charity art auction in Manhattan. I was 26, working as an assistant curator at a small gallery, barely making enough to cover my studio apartment in Queens. He was 35, a real estate developer with buildings across 3 states. I was examining a sculpture when he walked up and said something actually intelligent about the artist's technique. Most rich men at those events just threw money around to impress people, but Raymond seemed genuinely interested in the art. We talked for 2 hours. He asked about my work, my dreams of opening my own gallery someday, my thesis on contemporary Black artists reshaping the American art landscape. He listened like every word I said mattered. 3 weeks later, we were inseparable. 6 months after that, he proposed with a ring so big I was afraid to wear it on the subway.
Marry me. This ring is just the beginning of the life I want to give you.
Raymond, I don't know what to say. It's beautiful, but it's so much.
The wedding was everything little girls dream about. 300 guests, a venue overlooking the Hudson River, flowers flown in from Ecuador. My mama cried through the whole ceremony. My best friend, Angela, squeezed my hand and whispered, "You made it, girl." I thought I had. I really did. Moving into Raymond's mansion in Westchester felt like stepping into a different world. 12 bedrooms, an indoor pool, a wine cellar, staff quarters. His mother, Barbara, lived in the guest house on the property. That should have been my first red flag, but I was too in love to notice. Barbara was old money, the kind of woman who could make you feel poor just by looking at you. She had opinions about everything I did. The way I dressed was too casual, the way I spoke was too informal, the charities I suggested supporting were too urban. That was her word, urban. We both knew what she really meant. The first year of marriage was beautiful, though. Raymond would surprise me with weekend trips to Paris, jewelry for no reason, late-night conversations about building our future together. He wanted kids, I wanted my gallery. He said we had time for both. I believed him. Year 2, things shifted. His business was expanding into commercial properties, bigger deals, longer hours. Those romantic dinners became rushed takeout at midnight. The weekend trips stopped. He was always on his phone, always stressed, always somewhere else even when he was sitting right next to me. I told myself this was normal. This was what successful marriages looked like. You sacrifice for the partnership. By year 3, we had separate bedrooms. He said it was because his conference call started at 5 in the morning and he didn't want to wake me. He said it was temporary, just until this big hotel development deal closed. I decorated my room with artwork I'd been collecting, turned it into my own space. I pretended it didn't hurt to sleep alone in a mansion full of empty rooms. My own career had stopped completely. Every time I mentioned going back to work or starting my gallery, Raymond had a reason why it wasn't the right time. He needed me to host dinners for his business partners. Barbara needed help planning the annual charity gala. There was always something more important than my dreams. I started to feel like a very expensive decoration in his very expensive life. Then I started noticing things. Perfume on his shirts that wasn't mine, a leather scent, something expensive and bold that I would never wear. Credit card statements left on his desk showing jewelry purchases from Cartier, flowers from the premium florist downtown. I never received any jewelry. I never got any flowers. When I asked about it, he said they were client gifts, business expenses. I was being paranoid. Angela tried to warn me. She called one Tuesday and said she'd seen Raymond at that new Italian restaurant downtown with a woman, a blonde woman in a red dress, sitting close, laughing loud. I defended him. I said it was a business dinner. Angela went quiet for a moment, then said, "Okay, honey, if you say so." I could hear the doubt in her voice, but I wasn't ready to hear it. The woman's name was Vanessa. I found out by accident when I used Raymond's laptop to check my email and saw messages still open. She worked in commercial real estate too, supposedly helping him broker deals in the city. Her emails were professional enough on the surface, but there was something underneath. Inside jokes, casual references to dinners and drinks, a familiarity that made my stomach turn. I saw them together one night when I told Raymond I was visiting Angela but came home early because she had to work late. I drove past that Italian restaurant, and there they were through the window. She was everything I wasn't: aggressive, confident, loud. She touched his arm when she laughed. He leaned in when she spoke. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching, feeling something inside me crack. That night, I confronted him. I walked into his bedroom at midnight and asked him directly who Vanessa was. He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed like I was bothering him with something trivial and said she was a colleague. When I said I saw them having dinner, he got angry, actually angry at me. He said I was insecure and paranoid. He said successful men have business dinners, and if I couldn't handle that, maybe I wasn't cut out to be married to someone at his level. Then he told me to leave his room because he had an early meeting. I cried myself to sleep that night in my separate bedroom, in my separate life.
3 months later, Barbara invited me to brunch. This was unusual because Barbara barely spoke to me unless she was criticizing something. But she called personally and said we needed to have a family discussion. She wanted me to come to the main house on Sunday at 11. She said Raymond would be there. Something about her tone made me nervous, but I thought maybe this was finally her trying to bridge the gap between us. Maybe she'd noticed Raymond and I were struggling and wanted to help. I spent an hour getting ready that Sunday. I wore my best dress, the cream-colored one Raymond had bought me in Paris during our first year. I did my makeup carefully, styled my hair. I wanted to look like I belonged in that family, like I was worthy of the Cole name. I arrived at 10:55, exactly on time, like Barbara preferred. Raymond's car was already in the driveway. So was another car I didn't recognize, a white Mercedes convertible with vanity plates. My hands started shaking as I walked to the door. Barbara opened it before I could knock. She was wearing pearls and a cold smile. She led me to the living room without saying a word. Raymond was sitting on the sofa, and next to him, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, was Vanessa. She was wearing a diamond bracelet on her wrist, the same bracelet I'd shown Raymond 6 months ago when we walked past Tiffany's, the one I'd said would be perfect for our anniversary, the one he'd said was too expensive. I stopped in the doorway. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Barbara gestured to a chair across from them like this was a business meeting. She asked me to sit down. I sat because I didn't know what else to do. Barbara started talking. She said that Raymond had been unhappy for a long time. She said he'd been too kind, too patient, trying to make things work with someone who wasn't suited to their lifestyle. She said he'd finally found someone who understood his world, his ambitions, his needs. Then she said Raymond wanted a divorce. I looked at Raymond. I wanted him to say something, to explain, to tell his mother she was wrong. He just stared at his hands. I asked him if this was true, if this was really what he wanted. My voice sounded small and far away. That's when he looked up at me. That's when he said it. "You're a worthless loser who brought nothing to this marriage." The words hit me like physical blows. Worthless, loser, nothing. Barbara nodded like he just said something wise. She added that I was common, that I never quite fit into their social circle, that she tried to help me, but some people just don't have the breeding for this level of society. Vanessa was smiling, actually smiling. She looked at me and said, "No hard feelings, sweetie. You tried your best." Then she laughed and suggested maybe I could get a job at Bloomingdale's or something. She said it would be good for me to learn what real work feels like. I sat there with tears running down my face while Raymond listed everything wrong with me. I was boring, I was basic, I embarrassed him at events, I didn't understand his business, I was holding him back from his full potential. He told me he'd already had divorce papers drawn up. He was offering me $50,000 and my old Honda. He said I should be grateful because I didn't deserve even that.
Barbara stood up and said she expected me to return all the gifts they'd given me over the years, the jewelry, the clothes, even the artwork Raymond had bought me. She said those items were meant for a Cole wife, and soon I wouldn't be one anymore. Vanessa touched the diamond bracelet on her wrist and suggested I hurry up and move out because she was tired of waiting to redecorate. She called my taste pedestrian. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. I just sat there while these three people destroyed me with words, picking apart every piece of who I was. The worst part wasn't even what they were saying, it was how they were saying it. So casual, so certain, like I was nothing, like I'd always been nothing. Then my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost didn't look at it, but something made me pull it out. It was a text from Gerald, the lawyer who'd been handling my grandmother's estate down in Louisiana. My grandmother had passed away 6 months earlier. We'd been close when I was growing up, but we'd lost touch after I moved to New York. She'd been living on the family land outside Baton Rouge, the same property her parents had bought in the 1940s. 400 acres of fields and woods that everyone assumed was just empty country land. Gerald's text said, "It's official. Oil deal closed. $287 million deposited to your account. Call me to discuss the monthly royalty structure. Congratulations." I read it 3 times. Then I looked at Raymond, at Barbara, at Vanessa. They were all staring at me, waiting for me to cry more, to beg, to fall apart completely. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not an angry smile, a real, genuine smile of complete relief. Barbara looked confused. Raymond frowned. Vanessa stopped touching her bracelet. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I stood up. I thanked them for their honesty. I told Raymond I'd be happy to sign his divorce papers and asked if 1 week was enough time to collect my things from the house. Barbara looked surprised but pleased. She said, "Finally, a little dignity." I walked out of that house with my head up. I got in my car, drove 3 blocks, pulled over, and called Angela. When she answered, I was laughing and crying at the same time. I told her everything. We screamed together in that parking lot for 10 minutes straight. The next day, I hired the best divorce attorney in New York. I moved into a suite at the plaza. I went shopping and bought clothes that made me feel powerful. I called my old contacts in the art world and started making plans. And I watched $287 million appear in my bank account. Raymond had no idea. None of them did. The oil company had been trying to buy drilling rights to my grandmother's land for 3 years. She'd refused until right before she died, finally agreeing to terms that included a massive upfront payment plus $3 million in royalties every month for the next 20 years. She'd left everything to me in her will. Gerald had been handling it all quietly because I'd asked him to. I didn't want anyone to know about it until everything was finalized. I'd been waiting for the deal to close. It closed the exact moment Raymond called me worthless. Over the next week, I made moves. I bought a penthouse in Tribeca, paid cash. I purchased 3 commercial properties Raymond had been trying to acquire for months, outbid him through a company I created. I donated $5 million to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and got appointed to their board. I started a foundation supporting emerging artists from underrepresented communities. The art and society pages started talking about this mysterious new philanthropist. Nobody connected her to Raymond Cole's soon-to-be ex-wife. Why would they? Everyone knew I was just some nobody he'd married on a whim. The divorce meeting happened 2 weeks later. We met at my lawyer's office in Midtown. Raymond showed up with Vanessa, who'd apparently decided she wanted to be supportive now that she thought she was about to become the next Mrs. Cole. He was wearing his confident smile, the one he used when he knew he was winning. His lawyer presented the settlement, $50,000, the Honda, and a generous agreement not to pursue any of his assets. Raymond was being so kind, so fair to the woman who'd brought nothing to his life. Then my lawyer slid a folder across the table. Financial disclosure, required by New York law. Raymond opened it casually. I watched his face change. The confidence drained out of him like someone had pulled a plug. Net worth, $287 million.
Monthly income, $3 million in oil royalties plus investment returns. He stammered. He actually stammered. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. He said there must be a mistake. My lawyer calmly explained there was no mistake. Premarital inheritance acquired after our separation with an ironclad paper trail. Raymond tried to backtrack. He said we should reconsider the divorce. He said he'd been hasty, stressed, not thinking clearly. He said we could work things out. Vanessa had gone completely silent. She was staring at the folder like it was a bomb. Then she checked her phone, stood up, and said she had an appointment she'd forgotten about. She left without looking at Raymond. He tried again. He said we built a life together. He deserved a fair division of assets. His lawyer started talking about partnership and contribution. My lawyer shut it down in under 3 minutes. Premarital inheritance, no commingling of funds, prenuptial agreement that Raymond had insisted on back when he thought I was the poor one, airtight. I signed the papers. I didn't say a word to Raymond. I just signed my name and walked out. He called after me. I kept walking. The story leaked within days. Society pages love a reversal. Raymond Cole's nobody wife turned out to be the richest woman in their social circle. His business partners started looking at him differently. 3 major deals fell apart when investors decided they'd rather work with me. Vanessa left him for a hedge fund manager she met at a gala. Barbara stopped answering his calls, embarrassed by the whole situation. 6 months later, I was at a charity gala for my art foundation. I'd launched it with $20 million and a mission to support artists who'd been overlooked by traditional institutions. I was happy. Actually happy. I was dating Sterling, an architect I'd met at a museum opening. He was kind and funny and treated me like I mattered, not because of my money, but because he saw who I actually was. Raymond showed up at the gala. He looked rough, thinner, older, tired. He approached me during cocktail hour. He said he needed to talk. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. He said he was sorry, that he'd let money and status and his mother's opinions cloud his judgment. He said he loved me, that he'd always loved me, that we could start over. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I told him the truth. I said he didn't break me, he freed me. His cruelty showed me that I'd been living a small life, trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I thanked him for the divorce. I told him it was the best thing he'd ever done for me. Then I walked back to Sterling, who was talking with some gallery owners about a collaborative public art project. Raymond stood there alone in the middle of the party, watching the life he'd thrown away. I never spoke to him again. That day in Barbara's living room was the worst and best moment of my life. The worst because I had to hear someone I loved call me worthless. The best because it happened right when I discovered my actual worth.
I learned something important. Your value isn't determined by how someone treats you. It's not in being someone's wife or fitting into their world. It's in knowing yourself, owning your power, and refusing to shrink for anyone. The money didn't change who I am. It just revealed who they were. Raymond loved the idea of me as someone beneath him, someone grateful for his scraps. When that changed, he couldn't handle it. Now I run my foundation. I invest in women-owned businesses. I mentor young artists who remind me of myself 10 years ago. Sterling and I are talking about getting engaged, but this time I'm not rushing. This time I know my worth with or without a ring. Sometimes the trash really does take itself out. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the door opening to your best life. If you're in a situation where someone makes you feel small, remember this: their opinion of you is not your reality. Your comeback is always bigger than your setback. Subscribe as this story inspired you. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they're worth more than they've been told. Remember, the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. I'm living proof. I walked into that room as Raymond's worthless wife. I walked out as a woman worth $250 million. But the real treasure? finding myself again.